You know, Shusuke, I really love caprese salad. The synergy between the cheese and tomato really makes my mouth water.
Hey, yo, holy shuckles! I heard you want to try the spaghetti. Well, I heard it's got a nice kick to it.
Yeah, I like spicy food. I'm sure I'll be fine.
Hey, you better watch out. Tony likes to have his meatballs extra spicy, if you know what I'm saying.
I think I'll be fine.
Here, why don't I give you a hand?
What do you mean? You don't even have hands.
Hando!
Okay, Okuyasu Nijimura has one of the coolest abilities in the entire series of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the Hand. Or as professional weeb degenerates would say, the Hando is a humanoid stand with a pretty average spread of stats across the board. That is, except for its signature ability, the ability to erase whatever its right hand touches. Furthermore, when something is erased, the gap between that something is filled. This allows Okuyasu to pull things toward himself and imitate teleportation. However, are these items really being erased? No, Okuyasu even states that things he erased end up somewhere else. But where do they end up? That's what we're gonna try to answer today. And why can he sometimes fill the void and other times leave it open? Well, it's interesting and involves some of the concepts too big brain for Okuyasu, but maybe not for you, dear viewer. So let's all collectively grab our right hands and use them for the most important thing imaginable. Science.
Oh, this is how I sound like normally. I know. Shocker.
We've got Isahoodie here today because he has a background in civil engineering, and engineers together can solve many difficult problems. So when you're done with this video, go over to his channel and check out a different scientific method applied to Okuyasu's abilities. I've talked about a ton of different physics concepts in my Stand Science videos, and for the longest time, I sort of avoided general relativity. Personally, it's because I got an unsatisfactory grade on my general relativity midterm that I won't state here because if my parents are watching, they would probably be shocked that I ended up getting a physics degree with those scores. And it's with good reason too, because general relativity is like the biker older brother to special relativity, something that we touched on in the very first Stand Science. It's really hard to wrap your head around. When we live in our own world, we're in a Newtonian reference frame. Basic physics work to describe everything we do and see on a macro scale. If you change the frame of reference though, like say we want to look at how the smallest particles interact, we need a new set of physics to describe them, like quantum mechanics. If we act as an observer and view something accelerating from our perspective, we need a different way of describing what we see, and that's special relativity. Now imagine that we want to describe how the largest of planetary bodies move, interact, and existify simply as it relates to gravity. That's general relativity. But fear not, you don't need levels of IQ as high as cars to understand some of these things.
But my boy Okuyasu is just a regular macro scale guy with a really mega scale heart. How can science explain his stand?
Well, the way the stand is able to erase things has to do with the bending and cutting of space-time. And the only way we know how to describe those interactions are with planetary bodies. Space-time is back! Now, where have we heard this before? The Tusk Act 4's Stand Science had a nice little bit on the creation of gravity wells and what they mean, so check out that video if you're interested. Our good old friend Albert Einstein described the universe as having an intrinsic connection between space and time, and that surface made up the basis for the cosmos. Every planetary body that has mass will bend space-time in some way. A stand that creates its own gravity well is something like Tusk Act 4, but the Hando is a little different. General relativity at its core is a description of gravity and how it impacts space-time. It requires that all the physics of special relativity are consistent when describing the curvature of space-time. These include the two postulates, being the principle of relativity, which encompasses length contraction, time dilation, occurring in accelerating reference frames, relative addition of velocities, world lines, twin paradox, etc., and the principle of invariant light speed, which means light has a fixed speed of 299,792,458 meters per second, and this is called Lorentz invariance, meaning the laws of physics are the same for different observers in different reference frames.
It's honestly a matter of perspective. What you could see could be different from what I see. And in the engineering world, they call this a reference frame.
どうだ。やった。 見えないけど、すごいぞ!
One thing you have to understand is the presence of matter and energy in the universe alters the geometry of space-time so that it is non-Euclidean. Now, don't be scared by the nomenclature, because Euclidean geometry just means flat geometries, like squares, triangles, circles. Non-Euclidean geometry is like the surface of a sphere with positive curvature, or the surface of a saddle with negative curvature.
So what you're saying is when it comes to general relativity, flat is not justice.
Yes, I am. To understand how we actualize these things, I would like to briefly bring up the concept of tensors. Tensors are a way to describe the relationship between a lot of vectors and scalars at once. The metric tensor, g mu nu, is used to combine a pair of components for vectors associated with small intervals, like dx, to create a Lorentz invariant. But that's for measuring length in Cartesian geometry, like the x, y, and z axis, which would be flat spacetime. Move that over to spherical geometry, r, theta, and phi, for any surface of a sphere, and it becomes a bit more complicated. To be relevant to any understanding of special and general relativity, you need to use the tensors in spherical coordinates. Now, everything on the macro scale in the universe obeys the Einstein field equations, which establish a connection between the distribution of matter and energy in our universe and a deviation from Euclidean geometry and a universal rate of the passage of time for all observers at rest in an inertial frame. While Einstein and Newton took different conceptual approaches, the predictions are nearly identical to those of the Newtonian gravitation in the limit of weak fields like the gravity of Earth. You could solve these equations individually to describe how space-time moves and interacts, but that involves doing a lot of nonlinear differential equations, and I really don't feel like doing that. It can also become equally difficult if you decide to shove them into a matrix like some unholy turducken of math inside of physics inside of pain. But pick your poison, because any way you want to solve it, it's not pretty. And that's a little too complicated, so we're not going to go into any of that here. Now, there was a German astronomer named Karl Schwarzschild.
Oh my gosh, you have a mustache!
Who essentially did all of the difficult math that Einstein couldn't. The way I was taught about him is that Einstein would conceptualize different things in the universe, and Schwarzschild would work his magic with the math. Schwarzschild described points in 3 space with some large mass m, Newton's gravitational constant, big G, and a method known as measure it with a ruler, and then shove those results into a metric tensor. Things are going to get really messy if we go any deeper, because we'll have to start talking about contravariance and covariance and tensor rank, so I think this is a good place to stop. All you need to know is that Schwarzschild came up with solutions to the Einstein field equations, and that's why the Schwarzschild radius, a parameter in those field equations, is a measure of a gravitational radius and also defines the distance of an event horizon of a black hole.
Yeah, that's cool and all, but where's the JoJo, huh? Where's funny man Okuyasu? What does that have to do with any of it?
So what Hando is actually doing is slicing through the fabric of space-time and then instantaneously stitching it back together. Okuyasu, with the mental fortitude of a koala bear, is generating Schwarzschild solutions to cutting, curving, and restitching space-time with every swipe of Hando. In the last episode of Stand Science, we talked about Snell's law and how light moves in different speeds in different mediums. It's equivalent to something called Fermat's principle of least time, and it's a good analog for how light can move through complicated geometries of transparent objects, and more broadly for the topic of this video, how Okuyasu can move objects through space-time. But when Okuyasu slices up space-time, he can choose to stitch it back together or not, and we can postulate that the method which he is choosing to erase what he touches is through a wormhole. But what is a wormhole? Essentially, it connects 2 points in curved space-time, and possibly allows for instantaneous travel between those 2 points. The things Okuyasu scrape away tend to go somewhere, unlike Cream, whose void explicitly destroys the objects that go into it. That would be more along the lines of a black hole. Quick side tangent, Hando is an example of a wormhole, and something like the portal gun from Portal is not. Every single quote-unquote YouTube scientist is wrong about how the portal gun works. It's explicitly called the quantum tunneling device. Every single person who has theorized that the portal gun works with wormholes is either lying to you or is not an actual scientist. Sorry, I could make an entire video about the science behind the portal gun, because it's really frustrating that everyone takes the wormhole route and no one actually understands what tunneling is. But since I've done the experiments in a cryolab myself, I do. So you know what? I will make that video. Mark my words. Side tangent over. All you need to know is that Hando isn't called quantum tunneling. That's something entirely different. We'll tackle that later. So anyways, wormholes. I mean, I think the fold the page, fold the space explanation for Einstein, Rosen bridges does it justice.
So they say you want to go from here to there. But it's too far, right? Mm-hmm. So a wormhole bends space like this, so you can take a shortcut through a higher dimension.
But they entirely hinge on the concepts of general relativity. Now, in actuality, it takes something like infinite time to cross through a wormhole, but we're not concerned with that. Okuyasu isn't concerned with that. He doesn't care what happens to the stuff he scrapes away. A wormhole explanation for Hando's ability would also be consistent with conservation of momentum in curved spacetime, as he doesn't feel any recoil from scraping something into the void. We know technically isn't a void, it's just bending around spacetime. But to understand how a wormhole works, you have to understand the basics of general relativity. Wormholes are, at this moment in time, more science fiction than science fact, but black holes and general relativity have significantly more mathematical backing to them. It's like the turtle-tortoise thing. Not all turtles are tortoises, but all tortoises are turtles. Not all black holes are wormholes, but all wormholes are black holes. Think of Hando's ability as creating Schwarzschild wormholes, essentially bending two funnels of space-time together to eliminate the space between them and give a place for the things he scrapes away to go. He's not deleting things from existence, he's moving them on cosmic levels with just a little push. Phenomenal cosmic power! Itty bitty living space in Okuyasu's head.
I knew it! I knew it! Okuyasu is big brain. He is able to understand Schwarzschild's wormhole. The man uses Hanzo like 50 times during the show, and he knows fully well the science behind it. The big brain Einstein space-time continuum. Each swipe he does it. Thanks, Shuck. Good stuff. Good stuff indeed.
And isn't it comforting to know that Okuyasu, of all people, with probably the power to destroy the entire town of Morio, is casually eating food right next to me?
Yeah, Josuke!
And that's one potential explanation for how Okuyasu's ability works, but if you want to know another, check out Isahoodie's explanation for a more classical engineering perspective. As a fellow engineer, we had to go all out for our boy Okuyasu. If you like this video, make sure you hop over to his channel and give a like and subscribe. Check out my other stand science videos for more ways to apply physics to the world of JoJo's. Let me know in the comments below which stand I should cover next. Have a beautiful dueng, and I'll see you all next time.